Starting from the situation where at the beginning member states were introducing border controls in a rather uncoordinated way, we've moved ahead quite far after member states have requested the Commission to start coordinating, and at this point, we are really stepping up our efforts to coordinate the opening of or the lifting of restrictions following the communication that we adopted on the 13th of May regarding the progressive restoration of full free movement. So, just as a reminder, last week we had two video conferences on technical level about this issue. And at that point, we, at the last one, we, among others, recalled that the internal border controls must always be applied in full respect of the non-discrimination and proportionality principles, that they have to be coordinated. The Commission also referred at that point to the need for flexibility in case strict measures need to be reinstated. And we also discussed with member states the need to indeed step up the coordination of lifting of restrictions, taking into account criteria including the epidemiological situation, physical distancing and containment, as well as economic and social considerations in line with the communication that we adopted on the 13th of May. And so these very intensive discussions continue. We've this morning there's been a meeting of the IPCR in the Council, the Integrated Political Crisis Response, discussing this issue among others. There will be a COREPER discussion with borders issues on the agenda. There will be a video conference again on the technical level on borders, and all of this in advance of the Justice and Home Affairs Council that you referred to later this week. So very intense work from the Commission on that front.
Thank you, Adalbert. I only see one other hand raised.
Sorry.
Yeah, Patricia, you want to follow up? Patricia? I think you muted your own mic. Go ahead. Press speak.
I pressed it. Do you hear me now?
We do indeed.
Okay. I would like, if it's possible, that the Commission assess what happened with Italy and Austria in the past days. Could you tell me something? What is your opinion of the issues that were raised for not opening to Italy? Thank you.
Adalbert.
Thank you, Patricia. Look, so far we haven't really been able to comment on the individual measures and individual approaches that member states this issue is first member states.
Sorry, Adalbert, can you start over? No, I think we're having some technical problems.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I can't see you, but that's. I think that's okay. So as I was saying, we haven't so far been commenting on the individual measures and approaches taken by member states. The approach that we've taken as Commission has been to present to member states guidelines about the kinds of ways they should use to manage this issue, and insisting there on very important principles such as non-discrimination in particular. In this respect, importantly, non-discrimination between citizens, so no discrimination based on nationality, but also non-discrimination in the sense that if measures are lifted towards a specific region in the EU, the same treatment should be given to all regions around the EU, regardless of geography, that have the same epidemiological situation. So based on these principles, we've been discussing with member states in a very intensive way how they should approach things, and we will continue to do so as I just described.
Thank you, Adalbert. I only see one hand raised. David.
Oui, merci, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning. A further question for Adalbert, and I think also for yourself. The first question: do you feel member states are going to follow your recommendations? We've seen France turn away Belgians over the weekend because the Belgian government announced the opening of the borders to allow families to meet, for people to go shopping, but apparently the French were not informed of this. And we see difficulties in Italy, not just vis-à-vis Austria, but also Greece. And there seemed to be some difficulty because Italy is excluded from that list, or Italians have to go into quarantine. So is your approach bearing fruit as you'd hoped? And the second question for you, Eric. We've heard that there's an issue with a lack of coordination at the EU level. Even if efforts are certainly being made, significant efforts. And if there were a second wave, who would be in charge, or who would be responsible if things do not turn out well? Would it be at the EU level, the Commission, the Member States? We've heard accusations of the Commission not doing anything, and rightly the Commissioner said this morning that on the 29th of January warnings were issued but no action was taken, and nobody heard that message. Adalbert, on the first part of the question, on the first question indeed.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Je crois avoir perdu la connexion.
Oui, voilà, déconnecte peut-être ta caméra parce qu'il semble voilà.
Switch your camera off to try and improve the sound, please. Thank you, David. Well, I think you gave your own analysis, which is correct. Namely, there are still some difficulties or questions that haven't been completely solved between member states, in particular regarding communication between neighbouring countries. It isn't perfect for the time being, and it's for that reason that there's an increased need for coordination and increased need at the Commission level. And that's why all these additional efforts have been undertaken, those that I have just listed. Having said that, there's a lot of reports in the press still of difficulties or lack of communication between member states. Having said that, there are good examples of coordination between member states at the EU level, also thanks to the Commission's efforts and thanks to the guidelines that we published. This is work that's ongoing, but it has borne fruit nonetheless. Thank you. Thank you, Adalbert. And David, to come back to your second question on who would be responsible if there were to be a second wave of the pandemic. You said yourself, the Commission, the EU, has a coordination role, and just a coordination role. It's doing the maximum of what it can do in that coordination role, but the European Union is not just the institutions, it's also, as you rightly said, member states, and member states are players in a full role in the institutional setup of the EU. So it falls to each individual to assume their role within that coordination chain and also implementation of the EU policies. We're trying to ensure that there are very clear guidelines provided to Member States, and we have done that on the 13th of May, you'll recall. We're in constant contact with Member States to ensure that they have available to them information required and the necessary fora to be able to coordinate. But at the end of the day, it's up to everybody to assume their responsibilities.
Voilà, je ne vois pas d'autres.
So I don't see any further questions for us today. Thank you, everyone.